Welcome to Undercomplicating Stuff, where we, two psychologists and coaches with over 40 years of combined experience, share our insights to help undercomplicate important topics. A friendly reminder that this video is meant for conversational and entertainment purposes only. Please see the information section of this video for additional resources. So my name is Dr. Julie Radico. I am a psychologist, a coach, an author, and a speaker, and I'm here with Dr. Gedeon.
Thanks, Julie. I'm Stacey Gedeon. I'm a health psychologist and the founder and CEO of a healthcare consulting and professional coaching business. And I'm really looking forward to today's question and us discussing how do I deal with passive aggressive behavior? And it's something that we all come across, and we might even find that we engage in it ourselves at times. So we're going to explore how do we identify it, what might be causing us to do this or other people to do it, as well as some strategies to help you navigate a situation or a relationship where you think some of that might be going on. And like with most of the things we talk about, it's a normal process that people do from time to time. And we only get concerned when it really starts to impact relationships as well as the health and well-being of the person that might be engaging in those behaviors. A general overall description might be when someone's expressing their feelings of anger, resentment, or frustration indirectly rather than openly. And why this is a problem is it's confusing to the person who is on the receiving end. It doesn't really resolve anything and can actually escalate problems between people. If we think of some examples, and some may come to mind right away. I used to have a friend who was a door slammer, and I would know they were upset when they would slam the door. Other people might do a heavy sigh, and that's an indicator that perhaps they're upset with something or someone. Another thing can be body language, is someone being turned away from you or someone that maybe is not communicating as much as they usually do. And perhaps you say, hey, what's going on? And they might respond with, oh, no, I'm fine. Everything's okay. And looking at things like withholding affection, that's when it gets to a really deep level, perhaps in an intimate relationship, and maybe used as sort of a punishment or a threat. At work, we can find a lot of examples of that. And Julie, I know you and I have talked about how it might show up in work situations, and I'm wondering what you've come across before.
Work situations, you might experience some of this passive aggressiveness with like backhanded compliments. Oh, you did such a good presentation for what you're capable of. Ooh. Or you might feel like sideswiped in a conversation. So you're sitting in a room, like a group meeting, and a colleague has turned something in, as part of their work on the project, and you might hear a comment, "Oh, I'm so glad somebody turned their work in on time." You're sort of like caught in that unaware. And like you might also pick up in meetings body language, just to build on what you were sharing, Stacey, of like disengagement. Somebody might be like, I don't really want to be here and paying attention to you or to this topic. And they might be on their phone, or they might not make any eye contact, or they might always be running late or have to leave early. And there can be a whole host of other explanations for any and all of those things, right? Like they have to leave early because they have a responsibility that you're aware of, and it just is how it is. Or maybe the way that they function and feel most comfortable is to not make a lot of eye contact. That helps them like focus more. We can explain for all of these things, or most of them, some like compassionate explanations. And that, I think, leads to what we're going to talk about, some of like, well, why might people do this? But also like, what would be helpful for us if we're experiencing this? What could help us think about it? And I think one of the places my mind goes is to really like check your reality, because sometimes people just have different styles, and they might sigh before they start to talk because that's just how they breathe. They don't even recognize that they're doing it. It's not like, oh, here comes Stacey. Well, let's start talking about like maybe I just do that, and it's not at like, oh, I don't want to talk to Stacey about this, or I'm annoyed, or I want her to know that I don't want to have this conversation, whatever that like negative interpretation could be. Maybe it is just that's how I breathe. And so I think it's really important for us to have some compassion for ourselves and these moments, give some benefit of the doubt as we're starting to really like pull apart what's going on, but also really try to make sense of like, well, where might this be coming from? If we were like, nope, Julie, Stacey, 100%, this person is being passive aggressive. Like it wasn't even like a side swipe. They just clearly were like, it was at me. There's no other interpretation. Where might that be coming from? Like what, Stacey, I'm curious, like what would you say about like why might people pick up this style?
I love the fact that you highlighted that sometimes it's occasional and it really isn't passive aggressive behavior. And then for the times when it clearly is a pattern and something that is very obvious and in your face, why might somebody do it? Well, perhaps they learned it in their family growing up. Maybe that's the main communication style that everybody used when they were upset. And instead of saying, I'm frustrated that you did X, Y, and Z, it's the silent treatment, or again, the door slamming or drawer slamming, or isolating and sort of shutting somebody out. So that could certainly be a reason. It could also be something that people didn't learn how to put their feelings into words, or they're really uncomfortable. And I think a lot of us are with conflict or confrontation. Maybe they had a background where they grew up, and by expressing something they were upset with, they were shut down or was met with a really extreme reaction. And so they kind of don't know how else to express it. It could also be that people are overwhelmed and anxious, and that's another reason that they don't know how to sort of put out their feelings of being frustrated or angry or upset with somebody. Another thing to keep in mind is it may be a way to communicate that's been effective for them before. And so let's say a relationship, an intimate relationship, and if one person maybe is passive aggressive, and let's say their partner grew up in a home where they were very overly sensitive to signs and indicators from other family members, you could see how those might actually kind of pair up, in that the one partner who's very aware of the nonverbals and other things will pick up on things, and the partner who's passive aggressive continues to engage in this way because it works for them and they are able to get their needs met in a way that's maybe in this instance a little bit more manipulative than really not knowing how to express their thoughts and feelings.
It's such a great point, and I'm so glad you brought up the word manipulative. So I think about that term specifically as sometimes, sure, there might be people out in the world who are specifically trying to get you to do something, and they are being passive aggressive as an intentional way to do that. That might be how we like define manipulation. Somebody is trying to get their needs met and they're doing it in an intentionally like negative way. Most people I find are not trying to like manipulate you intentionally. They are trying to get their needs met, but it doesn't necessarily have to be at the expense of you. And maybe they don't even realize that it's affecting you that much. Yes, some people might. Some people might be like, yep, I intentionally am going to be cruel to Stacey because I want her to feel bad. And then sometimes it might be, well, maybe I grew up in a household where nobody named their feelings or it was unsafe to name their feelings. You might be in a position where you felt threatened in some type of way if you seemed vulnerable. And so, how else are you going to learn to express your dissatisfaction and let people know that you want them to help you or change what they're doing, other than to do it in these slight, backhanded kinds of ways? So maybe my intention isn't to make Stacey feel bad, but it's to say, hey, I'm not happy with what's happening here, and I don't know how to say it in a better way. And that doesn't make it an excuse for that person to do that, but having some of that like compassion for this idea that they might not be doing this intentionally to harm you. They just don't have better skills. Again, not an excuse, but space for you to maybe bridge to a conversation of, well, how might I deal with this? So one idea is to one-on-one have a conversation, not necessarily in the moment, because that puts people on the spot and they might then need to get like, especially if you're in like a group setting, like, people get into their corners, they get defensive. You might then be perceived as the one who's like attacking, even though you're just trying to like advocate for yourself. So, as much as you can, let yourself cool down in the moment. And then, after the fact, maybe send an email, a message, whatever it might be, pull the person aside after the meeting and in a kind way say, hey, could we have a check-in? Could we talk about the project that we're working on? Could we talk about what's going on with our communication right now? Because I'm really wanting to just make sure we're on the same page or that we're doing good work together. And if you notice that there's some key things in there, one, you're asking, hey, could we have this conversation? So you kind of want to get their permission that they're willing to engage. You want to set up another time so it's private. You're not putting them on the spot. You also are using a lot of I language, we language. So I'm not coming at that person and going, well, you keep doing all this passive aggressive stuff at me and you need to knock it off. And it like, I don't know in what universe somebody's going to respond well to that, but I've never seen that human being because I wouldn't respond well to that. I don't think anybody would because you just then feel attacked. You feel like you have to protect yourself. So there's a couple of like really like key things that you could start to consider and wanting to, yeah, not just be in this position where you feel like somebody's passively aggressively, like, trying to get a message across that you're like, you could do this in such a more healthy way, bridging to have those conversations to change the interaction dynamic. So important.
I love all those things you brought up, and especially the part about really assuming good intent, all things being equal. And when you go to approach that person in a time where you're maybe not as bothered by what happened, and again, it's private, just like you said, one sort of indicator to determine perhaps whether it's something that's done purposefully and manipulatively versus just the person struggles with how to express feelings or maybe wasn't aware is kind of how receptive they are. If you go to someone, they think, oh gosh, I didn't mean that, or yes, you're right, I was frustrated and I kind of didn't know how to bring that up. That's great. You can talk about the relationship and talk about ways to communicate better. If on the other hand, and this leads back to some of our other videos, Julie, where we talked about gaslighting, no, that didn't happen, you didn't see it that way, you misinterpreted that, then you're kind of in a different area. But let's go with the fact that we're assuming good intent and the person maybe wasn't aware. You don't have to know why they're doing it. They may not know why they're doing it, but bringing it up with those I statements that you talked about and letting them know it's impacting our relationship, our ability to work together. You help me understand what's going on, I think is really helpful. You don't want to ignore it and hope it goes away. Maybe there's a one-off and okay, but if it's a pattern, it will continue. And you also don't want to kind of go head to head and escalate with them. And now you're sarcastic. That really gets you nowhere. One of my key takeaways would be related to that you can yourself communicate clearly, ask for clarification, and hopefully the person's receptive and your relationship moves on where they are then also able to clarify their needs, their feelings, their viewpoints on things in a way that's really just healthy for both of you.
My takeaway to build onto that is to self-soothe, to take care of yourself in these situations because there's such a fine line to walk here of, is it all in my head? Because we even made space for this earlier, that they just naturally like sigh before they start talking and you feel like it's passive aggressive, but it's not actually directed at you. And maybe that's a learning curve for that person to know that that's how it comes off, but that's a whole nother conversation of giving them feedback on that versus like you wanting to advocate for yourself or make sure that you're having good, healthy work relationships. And trust yourself. Trust that you are feeling the way that you're feeling and that that's valid. And it's really hard to know in any situation, is it all in my head? Is it valid for me to feel like this? Am I the problem? If everybody is saying, "Oh, just get over it, it's fine." Is it really okay? Is it fine? Or is that just a culture? And I don't think it's a healthy culture. There's a lot of nuance here that nobody else is going to see or experience what you're experiencing in the exact same way that you are from your lens. So if you, Stacey, and I were all in a situation where we watched something happen, we are all going to see that from a slightly different perspective. And I might interpret it as, oh yeah, that person totally was being passive aggressive at you. And you might personally be like, oh, I don't think so. I think that's just their style and it's fine. And Stacey might be like, I didn't even see any issue here. It's all good. Like, it's just we come with all our own stuff. And so being aware of that, that it doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean the situation is wrong. It doesn't mean like, it's just give some credence to and space for your experience is valid no matter what anybody else says and what's happening. And so if you feel like there's a situation where you want to talk to that person about the pattern of communication that you've been experiencing, that's a healthy thing to do. And then being aware of that you might need to roll with the outcome if that person's not receptive to that conversation or it doesn't change what's happening. This might not be a one and done conversation. And it might be because you addressed one of the things that you felt was passive aggressive, and there's like six or seven other things. It's just what this person does, it's their style. And so you might need to repeatedly have communication and check in. So, all this to say, take care of yourself through all of this, that your experience is valid, but also there is going to be space for other people to have different perspectives of what you're experiencing, and that's okay. Try to have thoughtful, calm, kind communication with the person that you feel like is being passive aggressive to you directly and privately in a way that feels communal. If this topic resonated with you, please share it with somebody that you care about. Also, please comment, like, and subscribe. You can message us on our social media, like our YouTube or LinkedIn channels, with suggestions of questions that you'd like us to discuss in future episodes.